Every day, a human tavern keeper secretly fed an old alien until 2 SUVs arrived at his doorstep. The air in the Rusty Anchor Tavern smelled of alien spices, cheap liquor, and desperation. Jake Morgan wiped down the weathered oak bar with a rag that had seen better days, much like everything else in this forgotten corner of Praxis 9. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the room, hiding the worst of the wear and tear that came with running the only human establishment in the poorest district of an alien metropolis. Jake's muscular forearms flexed as he scrubbed a particularly stubborn stain. At 32, he still maintained the physique that had served him well during his days in the Earth Defense Force. Chestnut hair fell across his forehead as he worked, and he absently brushed it back with the back of his hand. "Another slow night," he muttered to himself, glancing at the nearly empty tavern. 3 Vorxelian merchants huddled in a corner booth, their translucent skin glowing faintly as they conversed in hushed tones. A solitary draconid sat at the far end of the bar, nursing what passed for whiskey in this part of the galaxy. Jake checked the time. 2100 hours. The nightly curfew for non-citizens would begin soon. Being the only human on the entire planet made him a perpetual outsider, despite having lived here for nearly 5 years. The local authorities, particularly the Praxian Enforcement Division, with their distinctive purple and black armored suits, made sure he never forgot his place. A bitter wind howled outside as the temperature plummeted unexpectedly. Praxis 9's unstable atmosphere was acting up again. Jake moved to the window, watching as the few remaining pedestrians hurried to find shelter. That's when he spotted him. An elderly Praxian huddled against the tavern's outer wall, shivering violently. The old alien's purple skin had faded to a sickly lavender, and his once proud posture was bent with age and hardship. What caught Jake's attention was the battered military armor the elder wore, covered in scrapes and worn patches that spoke of battles long past. Jake knew the risks. The PEDK had already warned him 3 times about aiding undesirables. Their exact words still rang in his ears. "There won't be a next time, human?" But something about the old Praxian's dignity, even in his current state, stirred something in Jake. Without hesitation, he unlocked the door and stepped outside. "Hey," Jake called softly. "It's dropping below freezing. Come inside." The elderly Praxian looked up, 4 weary eyes blinking in surprise. "Your kindness is unexpected," he rasped, his translator device crackling with static. "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises." Jake helped the alien to his feet. "I've got food and something warm to drink." Once inside, Jake locked the door and led the elder to a table near the kitchen. The few remaining patrons glanced over but quickly returned to their own business. Jake disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a large mug of his special homebrew, a concoction that somehow managed to please most alien palates. "Eat up," Jake said, setting the food down. "It's not fancy, but it's hot." The old Praxian's hands trembled as he lifted the spoon. "I haven't had a proper meal in some time," he admitted, taking a careful sip. His eyes widened. "This is remarkably good." Jake smiled. "Old Earth recipe, my mother's." As the elder ate, Jake returned to his position behind the bar, keeping one eye on the door. The curfew was now in effect, and PED patrols would be making their rounds soon. The draconid at the bar hissed softly, drawing Jake's attention. "They're coming," he warned, his forked tongue flicking nervously. Jake's heart sank as he heard the distinctive hum of PED vehicles outside. Through the frosted window, he could make out the silhouettes of 2 black SUVs pulling up to the tavern. The remaining patrons quickly settled their tabs and slipped out the back door, leaving only Jake and the elderly Praxian. "You should go," Jake told the elder, but it was too late. The door burst open with a crash that shook dust from the ceiling. A PED agent stormed in, his imposing armor gleaming under the tavern's lights, face hidden behind a featureless mask. Behind him, 2 more agents took up positions at the entrance. "We warned you, human," the lead agent said, his voice cold and mechanical through the mask's filter. "There would be no next time." Jake stood his ground, hands flat on the bar. He was freezing to death. "Not my concern," the agent replied, reaching for the restraints at his belt. "Your establishment is now forfeit, and you'll be processed for deportation." The elderly Praxian continued eating, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Then, without looking up, he spoke in a quiet but clear voice. "I'd advise you to reconsider your intentions." The lead agent froze, his hand hovering over his restraints. Slowly, he turned toward the elder. "Identify yourself," he demanded, but there was a new uncertainty in his voice. The elderly Praxian finally looked up, and Jake was startled by the sudden sharpness in those ancient eyes. "I believe you know exactly who I am, Agent Krell," the elder said, using the agent's name, though it wasn't displayed anywhere on his uniform. "And I believe your superiors would be most interested to learn about your recent activities in the Nix district." The agent took an involuntary step back, his posture suddenly rigid with what Jake recognized as fear. Without another word, he signaled to his companions, and they retreated from the tavern as quickly as they had entered. Jake stared at the elder in astonishment. "What the hell just happened?" The elderly Praxian merely smiled, returning to his meal. "Sometimes, young man, kindness is repaid in unexpected ways." Outside, the engines of the PED vehicles roared to life, and they sped away into the night, leaving Jake with 1,000 questions and the growing certainty that his life was about to change forever. The morning after the confrontation, Jake was restocking the bar when a firm knock echoed through the empty tavern. His hand instinctively moved toward the pulse pistol hidden beneath the counter before he called out, "We're closed." "I believe we have matters to discuss, Mr. Morgan," came the familiar voice of the elderly Praxian. Jake relaxed slightly and moved to unlock the door. The old alien stood there, looking considerably more composed than the night before. In daylight, Jake could see the insignia on his battered armor, faded but unmistakable markings of high military rank. "You know my name," Jake observed, stepping aside to let him enter. "Seems you know a lot about me, but I don't even know what to call you." The elder's four eyes crinkled with what Jake recognized as the Praxian equivalent of a smile. "General Thorin Vorx, retired, though disgraced, might be the term the current administration would prefer." Jake whistled low. "A general? No wonder those PED goons backed off." He gestured toward a table. "Coffee? It's real Earth stuff. Cost me a fortune to import." "I've never tried it," Thorin admitted, settling into a chair with a slight wince, "but I'm willing to experience this human ritual." As Jake prepared the coffee, Thorin studied the tavern with newfound interest. "You've created quite the sanctuary here, Mr. Morgan. A piece of Earth in our midst." "Jake," he corrected, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "And it's not much, but it's home now." Thorin accepted the mug, inhaling the aroma cautiously before taking a tentative sip. His eyes widened in surprise. Fascinating complexity, bitter yet somehow comforting. "That's humanity in a nutshell," Jake chuckled. "So, General, what brings you back to my humble establishment? I'm guessing it's not just my coffee." Thorin set down his mug, his expression growing serious. "I need your help, Jake, and in return I can offer you protection, something you clearly need if you intend to continue your charitable activities." "I'm listening." "My daughter, Vira," Thorin began, his voice softening. "We haven't spoken in nearly a decade. After I fell from grace, she distanced herself, built her own career in government. She's now Deputy Minister of Colonial Affairs." Jake let out a low whistle. "That's quite the climb." "Indeed, and it required severing all ties with her dissident father." Thorin's 4 eyes blinked in what Jake recognized as sadness. "But recent events have made reconciliation necessary. There are forces at work in our government, dangerous ideologies taking hold." "And you think she'll listen to you now?" Thorin shook his head. "Not to me, but she might listen to you." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Me? Why would a deputy minister give a damn what some human bartender has to say?" "Because you're human," Thorin said simply. "Vira has always been fascinated by your species. She studied Earth culture at the Galactic Academy. And because you helped me, an act of compassion that would impress her greatly." Jake leaned back in his chair, considering. "So I'm supposed to what? Walk into the Colonial Affairs Ministry and ask for a meeting with the deputy minister?" "Not quite so direct," Thorin replied with a slight smile. "Vira frequents the Celestial Gardens for lunch. It's a public space, though exclusive. With my credentials, I can get you access. The rest would depend on your..." What do humans call it? Charm? Jake ran a hand through his hair, weighing his options. The protection of a former general could keep the PED off his back, but getting involved in Praxian politics seemed risky at best, suicidal at worst. What exactly are these dangerous ideologies you mentioned? Thuran's expression darkened. There is a growing movement within our government advocating for complete isolation from other species, particularly humans. They see Earth's rapid expansion as a threat. Some are pushing for more permanent solutions to what they call the human question. A chill ran down Jake's spine. And your daughter? Vera has influence. She could help moderate these views, build bridges instead of walls, but she needs to understand the stakes and the value of cooperation. Jake drummed his fingers on the table. And if I do this for you? As I said, protection, but also... Thuran reached into a hidden pocket in his armor and produced a small, glowing data crystal. Information about other humans on Praxis 9. Jake's heart skipped a beat. What? That's impossible. I'm the only one. Thuran's eyes twinkled. Are you certain of that, Mr. Morgan? Our world is full of shadows and secrets. Before Jake could respond, the tavern's communication panel chimed with an incoming message. Jake excused himself and crossed to the counter to check it. The screen displayed a formal notification. By order of the Ministry of Colonial Affairs, all non-citizen business owners are required to attend a regulatory briefing tomorrow at 1300 hours. Attendance is mandatory. Jake looked back at Thuran, who seemed equally surprised. Seems your daughter might be coming to me after all. Thuran rose from his chair, suddenly looking every bit the commanding general he once was. Then we have work to do, Mr. Morgan. You'll need to make quite the impression. As the general moved toward the door, Jake called after him. You still haven't told me why she'd listened to me over her own father? Thuran paused, his hand on the door. Because, Jake Morgan, sometimes it takes an outsider to make us see the truth about ourselves. And humans, he smiled faintly, humans have an uncanny ability to do just that. The Ministry of Colonial Affairs towered over the capital district like a gleaming monument to Praxian superiority, all sharp angles and polished surfaces that reflected the pale blue sun of Praxis 9. Jake felt distinctly out of place as he approached the entrance, wearing the cleanest clothes he owned, a dark blue shirt that strained slightly across his broad shoulders, and black pants that had seen better days, but were at least free of stains. Security was tight. 4 PED officers flanked the entrance, their purple and black armor gleaming. Jake presented his non-citizen identification card in the meeting summons, bracing for trouble. To his surprise, one of the officers merely nodded and directed him to the 11th floor. Conference Room Delta. Don't wander, human. The elevator was packed with various alien species, business owners from across the city, all looking equally uncomfortable. A Merlonian shopkeeper with iridescent scales nodded respectfully to Jake. The famous human bartender, he whispered. Word of your encounter with the PED has spread. Jake grimaced. Great, just what I need. A reputation. The Merlonian's scales rippled with amusement. In these times, a human who stands his ground is refreshing. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area where attendants directed the visitors to their respective meeting rooms. Jake followed the signs to Conference Room Delta, finding it already half filled with non-citizens. He took a seat near the back, scanning the room for any sign of Thuran or his daughter. He didn't have to wait long. A side door opened, and 3 Praxian officials entered. 2 were clearly advisors, carrying data tablets and wearing the standard bureaucratic uniforms. But it was the third figure that captured Jake's attention. Deputy Minister Vyra Vorks moved with the confident grace of someone born to authority. Her purple skin was several shades lighter than her father's, almost lavender, and seemed to shimmer subtly under the room's lighting. Unlike most Praxian females who favored flowing robes, she wore a tailored suit that emphasized her slender yet athletic build. Her 4 eyes, a deep violet that bordered on indigo, surveyed the room with cool professionalism. Those eyes found Jake almost immediately, widening slightly in what might have been surprise before her expression returned to neutral detachment. Welcome, she began, her voice clear and measured. I appreciate your compliance with this mandatory briefing. Recent policy changes require our attention. What followed was 30 minutes of bureaucratic tedium, new tax regulations, import restrictions, and licensing requirements. Jake found his attention drifting until he heard the words human goods. Ineffective immediately, all establishments serving or selling human food, beverages, or entertainment must obtain special certification. Vira was saying, this is for the protection of our citizens, as human consumables may have unforeseen effects on Praxian physiology. A draconid merchant raised a clawed hand. Deputy Minister, these new regulations will bankrupt half the businesses in this room. Vira's expression remained impassive. The safety of our citizens is paramount. However, I understand your concerns. Those who wish to discuss specific hardships may schedule individual consultations with my office. Her eyes flicked briefly to Jake. This concludes our briefing. My assistant will provide documentation packets as you exit. Thank you for your cooperation. As the room began to empty, Jake remained seated, remembering Theron's instructions. When only a few stragglers remained, Vira approached him directly. Mr. Morgan, she said, her voice now lower, less formal. A moment of your time. Jake stood, suddenly aware of their height difference. He towered over her by at least a foot. Deputy Minister. My office, she said simply, gesturing toward the side door through which she'd entered. Her office was surprisingly modest, functional rather than ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Capitol, but the furniture was simple and the walls unadorned save for her credentials. So, she said, settling behind her desk, you're the human who's been causing such a stir. Jake remained standing, arms crossed. I wasn't aware feeding the hungry was considered stirring. A flicker of amusement crossed her features. Direct, refreshing after a day of political doublespeak. She studied him openly. You know my father. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded. General Vorks found his way to my tavern. And you helped him, despite the risks. She leaned forward slightly. Why? Because it was cold and he was hungry, Jake said simply. Doesn't matter what species you are. Basic decency shouldn't be a revolutionary act. Vira's four eyes blinked in what Jake recognized as the Praxian equivalent of surprise. Fascinating. You humans really do operate on such elemental principles. We call it compassion. We call it dangerous naivety, she countered, but without malice. Though I admit there's something compelling about it. She rose and moved to a small cabinet, retrieving 2 glasses and a bottle containing amber liquid. Earth whiskey, contraband, technically, but I find it educational to understand other cultures. Jake accepted the offered glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. A subtle current seemed to pass between them, and Vira withdrew her hand perhaps a fraction too quickly. My father wants to reconcile, she said abruptly, taking a sip of whiskey. He sent you as his emissary. Jake didn't bother denying it. He's concerned about certain political movements you might be able to influence. Vira's expression hardened. Politics is more complex than serving drinks to strangers, Mr. Morgan. Jake, he corrected, and I know more about complex situations than you might think. 5 years on a planet that mostly hates my species has been quite the education. Her eyes narrowed, but there was curiosity there too. And yet you stay. Why? Jake shrugged. Earth wasn't home anymore after the war, and someone needs to show Praxians that humans aren't the monsters your propaganda makes us out to be. 1 bar at a time? She asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. 1 meal at a time, he corrected, finishing his whiskey. The alcohol burned pleasantly, warming his chest. Your father misses you, Vira, and he's worried about where Praxis is heading. She moved closer, studying him with undisguised fascination. You're either very brave or very foolish to speak so plainly to a government official. I've been called worse, Jake smiled, suddenly aware of how close she was standing. Her scent was subtle but intoxicating, something like cinnamon and ozone. I find humans perplexing, she admitted, her voice softer now. Your kind acts on impulse, on feeling, yet you've accomplished so much. Maybe because of that, not despite it, Jake suggested. Vira's hand reached up, hovering near his face as if she wanted to touch him, but hesitated. I've studied your species extensively, academically, but I've never... The communication panel on her desk chimed insistently. Vera blinked, the moment broken, and stepped back to answer it. Deputy Minister, Security Chief Morden requests your immediate presence regarding the human situation, came a clipped voice. Inform him I'll be there shortly, she replied, then turned back to Jake. It seems our conversation must continue another time. Jake nodded, setting down his glass. Your father will be disappointed. Tell him, she hesitated. Tell him I'll consider his concerns. And perhaps, I would like to visit this tavern of yours. For research purposes, of course. Of course, Jake replied, unable to suppress a smile. The Rusty Anchor welcomes all researchers. As he turned to leave, Vira called after him. Mr. Morgan, Jake, these new regulations, they're not my doing. Be careful. Their eyes met one final time, and Jake saw something there beyond professional concern, something that made his pulse quicken as he stepped back into the corridor. Jake returned to the Rusty Anchor to find chaos waiting. 3 PED officers in their signature purple and black armor were methodically dismantling his bar, while a 4th supervised with obvious satisfaction. Bottles of earth liquor lay shattered on the floor, tables overturned, and the ancient jukebox that had taken Jake 2 years to import lay in pieces. What the hell is this? Jake demanded, stepping through the doorway. The supervising officer turned, and Jake recognized him immediately, Agent Krell, the same one who had confronted him about Tavern. Inspection, Krell said, his voice dripping with false courtesy. New regulations require thorough examination of all human consumables. For public safety, Jake's fists clenched at his sides. You have no right. We have every right, Krell interrupted, producing an official-looking document, signed by Security Chief Morden himself. Perhaps you should have considered the consequences before cozying up to Deputy Minister Vorks. So that was it. Word of his private meeting with Vira had reached the wrong ears. Jake surveyed the damage, calculating the cost. Most of his inventory was destroyed, and the equipment would take months to replace, if he could even afford it. You've made your point, Jake said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Now get out. Krell stepped closer, his mask inches from Jake's face. The inspection isn't complete. We still need to check the kitchen and your living quarters upstairs. You need a separate warrant for my private residence on... Jake countered, remembering the legal training all Earth expatriates received. Krell's posture stiffened. Don't test me, human. One word from me, and your license is permanently revoked. The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of General Theron, who entered the tavern with the confidence of a man accustomed to command. Despite his aged appearance, the authority in his bearing was unmistakable. Agent Krell, Theron said calmly, I believe you've exceeded your jurisdiction. Krell spun around. General Vorks, this is an official PED operation. Your interference is entirely appropriate, Theron finished for him, producing a small holographic badge. As a special consultant to the Oversight Committee, I have the authority to halt any operation I deem excessive. The other officers had stopped their destruction, watching the confrontation with evident unease. This human is harboring illegal Earth substances, Krell insisted. Then confiscate them properly with an itemized receipt as required by law, Theron replied. Or shall I contact Committee Chairman Dren about your methods? Krell's mask concealed his expression, but his body language conveyed his fury. After a tense moment, he signaled to his officers. We're done here, for now. As they filed out, he paused at the door. This isn't over, human, not by a long shot. Once they were gone, Jake began righting overturned furniture. Perfect timing, General. Though I'm not sure if you just saved my bar or painted an even bigger target on my back. Theron helped him lift a heavy table. Both, I suspect. Did you speak with Vira? I did. She's, considering your concerns. Jake hesitated. She mentioned visiting the tavern. Thorin's 4 eyes widened. That's unexpected and promising. Jake was about to respond when the door opened again. Both men tensed, expecting Krell's return, but instead found Vira standing in the doorway, surveying the destruction with evident shock. What happened here? She demanded, stepping inside and letting the door close behind her. Your new regulations in action, Jake replied, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. Apparently, human alcohol is a grave threat to public safety. Vera's expression darkened. This wasn't authorized. Not like this. She turned to her father, their eyes meeting for the first time in years. "Father." "Vira," Theron replied softly. "You look well." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history. Finally, Vira turned back to Jake. "I came to warn you. Security Chief Morden has placed you under surveillance. He suspects you of subversive activities." "Feeding the hungry? Talking to government officials?" Jake asked, sweeping broken glass into a pile. "Being human," she corrected quietly. "Morden is the driving force behind the isolation movement. He sees Earth's expansion as an existential threat to Praxian sovereignty." Jake laughed humorlessly. "I'm one man running a bar in the poorest district on the planet." "Some threat?" "You underestimate your impact," Vera said, moving closer. "Word of your defiance has spread. You become a symbol to non-citizens, proof that the system can be challenged." "I never wanted to challenge anything," Jake protested. "I just wanted to serve drinks and help people who needed it." "The most dangerous revolutions often begin with the simplest acts of kindness," Theron observed. Vera's attention remained fixed on Jake, her 4 eyes studying him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "Morden plans to arrest you both, tonight. The charges are already prepared. Sedition, conspiracy, illegal distribution of controlled substances." "Then we should leave," Theron said urgently. "And go where?" Jake asked. "This is my home. Everything I have is here." Vira stepped even closer, her hand brushing against Jake's arm. "My private residence. It's secure and Morden wouldn't dare move against me without irrefutable evidence." The touch of her fingers against his skin sent an unexpected jolt through Jake's body. Their eyes met, and he saw something beyond professional concern in her gaze. A warmth, an interest that mirrored his own growing attraction. "Your career," Jake began, "is already at risk," she finished for him. "I've been questioning Morden's policies too openly. He's looking for ways to discredit me." Theron watched this exchange with a mixture of surprise and knowing amusement. "I can find my own sanctuary," he said. "Old soldiers have contingency plans. But Jake should accept your offer, Vira." Outside, the distinctive hum of PED vehicles grew louder. Time was running out. "Pack what you need," Vira said, her hand still resting on Jake's arm. "My transport is in the alley behind the building." As Jake quickly gathered essentials from his upstairs apartment, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, disheveled, tense, but somehow more alive than he'd felt in years. This wasn't how he'd imagined his day going when he'd put on his best shirt for the ministry meeting. When he returned downstairs, Thorin was gone, and Vira stood alone in the center of the devastated bar. "He left through the back," she explained. "We'll rendezvous tomorrow at a secure location." Jake nodded, taking one last look at the rusty anchor, his home and business for 5 years now in ruins. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said quietly. Vera's expression softened and she reached up to touch his face gently. "I rarely act without careful consideration, Jake Morgan, but meeting you," she hesitated, searching for words, "has made me question many things I once took for granted." The sound of boots on the street outside spurred them to action. They slipped out the back door just as the front entrance burst open, disappearing into the gathering dusk of Praxis 9's short evening. Vira's private residence was nothing like Jake had imagined. Instead of the opulent mansion befitting a high-ranking government official, it was a modest apartment in a secure building on the city's outskirts. Clean lines, minimal furnishings, and large windows overlooking the capital's glittering skyline gave it an austere elegance. "Not what you expected?" Vera asked, noting his surprise as she secured the door behind them. Jake set down his small bag of belongings. "I thought deputy ministers lived in palaces." "Some do," she admitted, activating the apartment's security system. "I prefer simplicity and anonymity." She moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing a sophisticated communications array. "We need to contact my father. If Morden is moving against you, he's likely targeting Thorin as well." As Vira worked the controls, Jake wandered to her desk, where a holographic display showed multiple files marked with government seals. One caught his eye. Operation Purification. "Vira," he called, his voice tight. "What is this?" She glanced over, her expression darkening. "Files I wasn't supposed to access. Morden's been planning something big for months. I've been trying to piece it together. Jake scrolled through the document, his blood running cold. This is more than just arresting a few troublesome aliens. This is systematic deportation of all non-Praxians, Vera finished, abandoning the communication panel to join him. Starting with humans. Morden believes your species poses the greatest threat to Praxian cultural purity. There's only one of me, Jake said, bewildered. Not anymore, Vira replied, pulling up another file. An Earth ship crashed in the northern wilderness 3 months ago. Morden's forces captured the survivors, 17 humans. They're being held at a black site facility outside the capital. Jake stared at the grainy surveillance images of humans in detention cells. Why wasn't this reported to Earth authorities? Because Morden plans to use them, Vira explained, her voice dropping. The file mentions controlled incidents to justify emergency powers. He's going to stage attacks by these humans against Praxian citizens. A notification flashed on the communication panel. It's my father, Vira said, accepting the transmission. Thuran's face appeared, his expression grim. Vira, Jake, are you secure? For now, Vira confirmed. Father, we found... I know about the humans, Thorin interrupted. That's why I'm contacting you. I attempted to reach my safe house, but Morden's agents were waiting. I was forced to flee to an alternative location. Jake leaned into the frame. Where are you now? With friends, Thuran said cryptically. But I've been injured. Nothing serious, he added quickly, seeing their concern. But I need time to recover before I can move again. We need to rescue those humans, Jake insisted. If Morden uses them for his false flag operation... It's already in motion, Thorin cut in. According to my sources, Morden plans to begin tomorrow night. A staged attack on the central market, blamed on human terrorists. Vera's 4 eyes widened in alarm. That would cause mass panic. The public would demand action against all off-worlders. Precisely, Thorin nodded, and Morden would have his justification for Operation Purification. Jake paced the room, mind racing. We need evidence of his plan. Something concrete we can take to the Planetary Council. The detention facility, Vira said suddenly. If we can document the humans being held there and find records of Morden's orders, it would be heavily guarded, Thorin warned. And Vahra, if you're caught, my career would be the least of our concern, she finished grimly. After discussing details and contingencies, they ended the transmission with a promise to rendezvous the following evening. As the screen went dark, the apartment fell into silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the city below. Jake turned to find Vira watching him, her expression unreadable. You don't have to do this, he said softly. This isn't your fight. Isn't it? She countered, moving closer. Morden's xenophobia threatens everything I believe in. Everything my father taught me before politics drove us apart. And what's that? That strength comes from diversity. That isolation breeds stagnation. Her voice softened. That sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from those most different from ourselves. The space between them seemed charged with electricity. Jake was acutely aware of her proximity, of the subtle scent that was uniquely hers. Why did you really help me? He asked, his voice low. A deputy minister risking everything for a human bartender doesn't make sense. Vera's 4 eyes studied him intently. I've spent years studying humans academically, your history, your cultures, your biology, but meeting you... She hesitated, then reached up to touch his face with slender fingers. Theory is a poor substitute for experience. Jake's breath caught at her touch. Is that what I am? An experience? You're a revelation, she whispered, her fingers tracing the contours of his jaw. Humans feel everything so intensely. You live with such abandon, such passion. It's terrifying and exhilarating. Jake caught her hand in his thumb brushing across her palm. Praxians don't feel passion? We control it, contain it, channel it into appropriate avenues. Her voice had taken on a breathless quality. But you embrace it. The tension between them was palpable, a living thing demanding acknowledgement. Jake found himself leaning closer, drawn by forces beyond rational thought. "This is unwise," Vira murmured, even as her free hand came to rest against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "Probably," Jake agreed, his fingers gently tilting her chin upward. "But wisdom seems overrated right now." Their lips met tentatively at first, then with growing urgency. Jake was surprised by the warmth of her mouth, the softness of her skin against his. What began as exploration quickly transformed into something more primal, more desperate, as if they both sought to bridge the vast differences between their species through touch alone. They moved to her bedroom without conscious decision, articles of clothing discarded along the way. In the dim light, Jake marveled at the subtle differences in their anatomies, the faint luminescence of her lavender skin, the graceful contours of her body. Yet these differences only heightened the wonder of their connection. What followed was a discovery of new sensations, of unexpected harmonies between human and Praxian physiology. Their joining transcended the merely physical, becoming something that felt almost profound, a defiance of the very prejudices threatening to tear their worlds apart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, the city lights casting shifting patterns across the ceiling. Jake traced lazy patterns along Vira's arm, still amazed by the silken texture of her skin. "That was..." Vira began, then laughed softly. "I have no adequate words." "I think that's universal," Jake smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Some experiences defy language." She propped herself up on one elbow, suddenly serious. "Tomorrow will be dangerous. If we're caught..." Jake silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "Then we won't get caught." "Such human confidence," she teased, but her eyes remained troubled. "Jake, if something happens to me, promise you'll still try to stop Morden. Those humans in detention, they need you." "Nothing's going to happen," he insisted, pulling her closer. "We'll get the evidence, expose Morden's plot, and free the prisoners. Together." Vera settled against his chest, her breathing gradually slowing as exhaustion claimed her. But Jake remained awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with plans and contingencies. Tomorrow they would infiltrate a high-security detention facility on the slim hope of finding evidence to stop a xenophobic conspiracy. And if they failed, he would lose not only his home on this alien world, but also this unexpected connection he'd found with Vira. A connection that had somehow become more important to him than he could have imagined possible. The detention facility loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a fortress of shadow, its perimeter illuminated by harsh spotlights that swept across the barren grounds. Jake and Vira crouched behind a maintenance shed, studying the patrol patterns of the guards in their distinctive purple and black armor. "Security's even tighter than we expected," Vira whispered, adjusting the stolen PED uniform she wore. The helmet concealed her features, though it was slightly too large for her frame. "Morden must be accelerating his timeline." Jake nodded, uncomfortable in his own borrowed uniform. "Your access code's still good." "They should be. Deputy ministers retain level 3 clearance for all facilities." She hesitated. "But if Morden's already flagged me as a dissident..." "Then we improvise," Jake finished, checking the stunner he'd taken from Vera's personal security cache. "That's what humans do best." Her four eyes crinkled in what Jake now recognized as her version of a smile. "Your confidence is either your species' greatest strength or most dangerous delusion." "Probably both," he admitted, squeezing her hand briefly. "Ready?" They approached the side entrance with practiced nonchalance, Vera's stolen credentials granting them access to the outer perimeter. The first two checkpoints were navigated with minimal suspicion. Just another pair of PED officers reporting for duty. It was at the third checkpoint that things went sideways. "Credentials," demanded a senior officer, his mask tilted suspiciously as he examined Vira's identification. "This clearance was flagged an hour ago. Security protocol requires verification." Jake tensed, hand drifting toward his concealed stunner, but Vira stepped forward. "Override Alpha 7 Tango," she stated confidently. "Direct authorization from Security Chief Morden for inspection of the human prisoners." The officer hesitated, clearly uncertain. "I'll need to confirm..." "Confirm it then," Vira snapped with imperious authority, and explained to the chief why his surprise inspection was announced in advance. The bluff worked. The officer stepped aside, muttering apologies as they passed through into the detention block. "Impressive," Jake murmured as they hurried down a sterile corridor. "I've sat through enough of Morden's intimidation tactics to mimic them," Vera replied grimly. "The human detention cells should be in Block D, according to the files." They rounded a corner and froze. Ahead, a group of PED officers surrounded a prisoner being escorted between cell blocks. A prisoner whose battered military armor and dignified bearing were unmistakable despite his obvious injuries. "Father," Vira breathed, instinctively stepping forward before Jake caught her arm. "We can't just rush in," he cautioned. "We need a distraction." As if in answer to his words, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor as an automated voice announced, "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel report to designated stations." The officers escorting Tavern looked around in confusion. One barked into his communicator, then gestured to his companions. "Take the prisoner to interrogation. We'll deal with him after this is contained." As they marched Tavern away, Jake and Vira exchanged glances. "That wasn't us," Jake said. "Someone else is here." "The distraction we needed," Vira replied. "You follow my father. I'll find the human prisoners and the evidence." Jake shook his head firmly. "We stick together. I'm not leaving you alone in here." "Jake," she said softly, touching his face through the helmet's opening. "Trust me, I can handle myself. And those humans need someone of their own kind right now." Before he could protest further, she pressed something into his hand, a small data crystal. "If we're separated, this has everything we've discovered about Morden's plan. Get it to the Planetary Council." Their eyes met in a moment of silent communication that transcended words. Then Vera was gone, moving swiftly down a side corridor toward Block D. Jake followed the officers escorting Tavern, maintaining a discreet distance. They led the general to an isolated section marked Special Interrogation, where 2 guards remained posted outside while the others departed to respond to the security alert. Approaching the guards with practiced authority, Jake announced, "Relief detail. Chief Morden wants all available personnel responding to the breach." One guard shifted uncertainly. "We have orders to remain with the prisoner." "New order," Jake insisted, gesturing impatiently. "Or stay and explain to Morden why you ignored a direct command." The guards exchanged glances, then reluctantly departed, leaving Jake alone outside the interrogation room. He waited until they turned the corner, then slipped inside. Tavern was secured to a chair in the center of the room, his head bowed. He looked up as Jake entered, eyes widening in recognition as Jake removed his helmet. "Morgan," he rasped, his voice rough from what had clearly been rough treatment. "You shouldn't be here." "Seems to be a recurring theme in our relationship," Jake replied, quickly working to release the restraints. "Vira's here too, freeing the human prisoners." Tavern's expression darkened. "It's a trap. Morden knew you were coming. He's been feeding Vira information, waiting for her to act." Jake's blood ran cold. "We need to warn her." Before they could move, the door slid open. Security Chief Morden himself stood in the entrance, flanked by Agent Krell and 4 armed guards. Unlike the masked PED officers, Morden wore no helmet, revealing sharp Praxian features twisted in a smile of cold triumph. "The human bartender," Morden said, his voice silky with satisfaction. "How predictable. Humans always return for their own, don't they? Like animals retrieving their young." Jake straightened, positioning himself between Morden and the still weakened Thorin. "Where's Vira?" "Deputy Minister Vorks is currently experiencing the consequences of treason," Morden replied casually. "Don't worry, you'll be reunited shortly, in a cell before your public execution." "The Planetary Council won't allow it," Thorin growled, struggling to his feet. Morden laughed. "The Council will thank me when human terrorists attack the Central Market tonight. Attacks carried out by the very prisoners your daughter is attempting to free." He gestured to his guards. "Take them both." What happened next occurred with the fluid speed that only comes from years of combat training. Jake dropped to one knee, drawing his stunner and firing in a single motion. The first guard dropped, then the second. Thorin, despite his injuries, lunged at Krell with surprising agility, wrestling him to the ground. Morden backed away, drawing his own weapon, but Jake was faster. His stunner blast caught the security chief square in the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Humans, Jake said, standing over Morden's unconscious form, are full of surprises. Alarms continued to blare as they secured the fallen guards and retrieved their weapons. We need to find Vyra, Jake insisted, helping Tharan to the door. No, Tharan countered firmly. You need to get to the control center. If Morden was telling the truth about an attack tonight, there will be evidence there, and a way to stop it. I'm not leaving either of you, Jake protested. Tharan gripped his arm with surprising strength. This is bigger than us, Jake. Vyra understood that when she gave you that data crystal. Honor her choice. Torn between duty and desire, Jake finally nodded. The control center. Where? 2 levels up, north quadrant. Go, I'll find my daughter. They parted in the corridor, Jake racing toward the facility's nerve center, while Tharan moved with determined purpose toward Block D. The alarms provided cover for Jake's movement, as most personnel were responding to the original breach, which he still didn't understand. The control center was surprisingly unguarded when he arrived, its staff apparently drawn away by the emergency. Jake quickly accessed the main terminal, downloading all files related to Operation Purification and the planned false flag attack. The evidence was damning, detailed plans to use mind-controlled human prisoners as weapons, complete with Morden's authorization codes. As he worked, the door slid open behind him. Jake spun, weapon raised, then froze in astonishment. 17 humans stood in the doorway, led by Vyra and Tharan. The freed prisoners, men and women in tattered Earth Defense Force uniforms, stared at Jake with equal surprise. You're human, one woman said, stepping forward. An actual free human on this godforsaken planet. Captain Diana Christensen, she introduced herself. These are my crew. We crashed 3 months ago during a routine patrol. Been guests of Chief Morden ever since. Jake holstered his weapon, grinning despite the danger. Jake Morgan, bartender, and apparently part of a rescue mission. Vyra moved to his side, her helmet discarded, face flushed with exertion and triumph. We need to move. I've triggered the facility's evacuation protocol, but it won't last long. I've got everything we need, Jake confirmed, holding up the data crystal now loaded with irrefutable evidence. Enough to bury Morden and his entire operation. They moved swiftly through the now chaotic facility, PED officers too concerned with the apparent system failure to question their departure. Outside, they commandeered 2 transport vehicles and sped toward the capital. The Planetary Council is in emergency session, Tharan explained as they drove. Morden convinced them to grant him emergency powers tonight. We have less than 2 hours to present our evidence. Jake glanced at Vera beside him, her expression determined despite her exhaustion. You risked everything, he said softly. For my planet, she replied. And for you. Her hand found his on the console between them. Some things are worth the risk. The council chambers were in uproar when they arrived. Morden supporters arguing vehemently for immediate action against the human threat. Their entrance, a battered general, a disheveled deputy minister, a human bartender, and 17 Earth Defense Force personnel, caused instant silence. What followed was a reckoning. The evidence was presented, testimonies given, Morden's plot exposed in all its xenophobic detail. The council's shock turned to outrage, then to resolution. By nightfall, Morden and his conspirators were in custody, the false flag operation dismantled, and an emergency communication sent to Earth authorities regarding the recovered crew. 3 days later, Jake stood in the ruins of the rusty anchor, surveying the damage with a critical eye. Rebuilding would take time, but the council's generous compensation package, an official apology, would cover the costs. Planning the grand reopening already? Vyra asked, stepping through the broken doorway. She wore civilian clothes now, her government uniform replaced by a simple tunic and pants that somehow made her even more beautiful to Jake's eyes. Thinking bigger, actually, he replied, pulling her into his arms. The council's new interspecies relations committee needs a headquarters, somewhere comfortable, with good food and better drinks, somewhere all species can feel welcome. And they appointed a human bartender as chairman. She laughed, her arms encircling his neck. The same human who caused an interplanetary incident by feeding a hungry old alien. The same human who fell in love with the old alien's daughter, Jake added softly, his lips finding hers in a kiss that still felt like a miracle of biology and emotion. When they parted, Thorin stood in the doorway, looking healthier than Jake had ever seen him. The Earth delegation arrives tomorrow, he announced. Captain Christensen's report has apparently caused quite a stir. They're talking about establishing a permanent human embassy on Praxis 9. Jake grinned. Guess I won't be the only human around anymore. You'll always be the first, Vyra said, her eyes shining with promise. The one who showed us what humanity truly means. Outside, the sun was setting on Praxis 9, casting long shadows across a city forever changed by one simple act of kindness on a cold night, when a human male tavern keeper secretly fed an old humanoid alien, never suspecting where that meal would lead.